And today, inshallah, we'll start with the station of muraqabah. And the station of muraqabah means watchfulness. Raqaba, yuraqibu. Raqaba is the past tense. The verb means watched, observed. So sometimes muraqabah would be translated as observation, observance, watchfulness. And Ibn al-Qayyim in Madarij al-Salikin is a commentary on Manazil al-Sa'ilin. Madarij al-Salikin means what? The rankings of the seekers. And Manazil al-Sa'irin means the stations of the wayfarers. So Imam Abdullah al-Ansari rahimahullah, who was an imam from the 5th century after Hijrah, wrote Manazil al-Sa'irin, and Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, who was from the 8th century after Hijrah, wrote a commentary on Manazil al-Sa'irin, which is called Madarij al-Salikin. Madarij, the rankings of the seekers, and the Manazil al-Sa'irin is the stations of the wayfarers or the travelers. So Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah said, the author of Manazil al-Sa'irin, or the author of Al-Manazil, said that muraqabah is the constant beholding of the ultimate goal, and it is divided into 3 phases. Dawam mulahazat al-maqsood, the constant beholding of your ultimate goal, your ultimate objective. And certainly if your ultimate goal is anything short of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and togetherness with Allah, and takuna fi ma'iyat Allah, to be with Allah, this togetherness with Allah, which some people call union, but union is a dangerous word, because the union here is union in purpose, not a union in essence. But since the word has been used in the wrong context, we will avoid the use of the word union, and we will just call it togetherness. And تكون في معية الله, to be ma'allah, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is certainly the ultimate objective of the wayfarers, the journeyers, the travelers on this path. Muraqabah is the constant beholding of the ultimate goal, and it is divided into 3 phases. The first phase, muraqabah of the truth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the true one, or the truth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by proceeding towards Him at all times with diverting glorification. تعظيم مذهل. الدرجة الأولى مراقبة الحق تعالى في السير إليه على الدوام بين تعظيم مذهل وسرور ومدنات حاملة وسرور باعث. By proceeding to Him, towards Him at all times with diverting glorification or distracting glorification, moving nearness or enticing nearness, and reviving joy. And we will explain what that means. His saying the constant beholding of the ultimate goal means the constant presence of the heart with Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So your heart is always present with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even when you are in the midst of people, your heart is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not with them. Your heart is controlled by Allah, is not controlled by them. Your eyes could be beholding the people, but your heart is beholding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His pleasure, not the people. So that is basically to have focus on your ultimate destination and to keep this focus. And it gets sometimes hard, but you have to remind yourself that this is your only way to success, is to stay focused. Because if you get distracted and you walk off the path by this distraction, if you like, sideways and short, you think that there is a shortcut here or a sideway there, or you think that you could spend a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there, you may not be able to come back to the path. Unless you continue to be focused, how do you guarantee to yourself that I will just take, the sideway and then I'll be able to make it back? You may not be able to make it back. Because Allah may see your heart. Allah may see your heart, and you may not be able to come back. So stay on this road. This is the straight path. This is Sirat al-Mustaqim. This is the way that the Prophet ﷺ and his Sahaba laid out for you, delineated for you, demarcated for you. And the Prophet ﷺ, not only did he delineate this road for you, but he put up enough milestones and guiding posts and fences on the sides and everything. Stay there. Stay there. This is the path to safety. Why do you take other paths and you don't have guarantees that you will ever be able to come back? So as long as you keep focused, stay focused on your ultimate goal, which is the pleasure of Allah, and know that the path that leads to this is the path that had been shown to you by the Prophet ﷺ, stay on the path of safety and don't venture into the other paths. Then he said, وقوله بين تعظيم مذهل فهو امتلاء القلب من عظمة الله عز وجل بحيث يظهره ذلك عن تعظيم غيره وعن الالتفات إليه. So his saying was that averting glorification is to have the heart filled with the glorification of Allah. Such a state makes the servant preoccupied with the pursuit of Allah's pleasure and unconcerned with glorifying others, unconcerned with the pleasure of others, unconcerned with the praise of others. Imagine someone who is beholding his Lord who created him. Will he be paying attention? How could we compete with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our hearts if we have the least amount of intelligence, spiritual intelligence? Because spiritual intelligence is very different from intellectual intelligence, right or wrong? Absolutely. How many intellectually intelligent people, who have like a raw IQ that is much better than all of us in this room, that are not spiritually intelligent? So that spiritual intelligence, if you have the least amount of spiritual intelligence, you will not really get distracted, because compare Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to others, they can never compete for your attention. If you know who Allah is and you know who the people are, they will never be able to compete with Him for your attention. That's why Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah used to say, لا يعرف الخلق والخالق أحد فيؤثر معاملة الخلق على الخالق. No one truly knows who the Creator is and who the creation or what the creation is like, and then favors to deal with the creation over the Creator. لا يعرف الخلق والخالق أحد فيؤثر معاملة الخلق على الخالق. So if you truly know who the Creator is, if you truly know the greatness of the Creator and the mercy of the Creator and the compassion of the Creator, then you would never seek to interact or to transact with the creation over transacting with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So no deed will be corrupted with impurities of intention. Because, imagine like you're praying, you're doing this charitable whatever activity, you're going to the hospital to visit the sick, you're making a website for an Islamic organization, and so on. And then you either take your full reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or your heart starts to like swerve away from that focus and be sort of distracted by, so-and-so would like this, or I will get praised, or I'll get recognized, or people will say I'm good, or pious, or smart, or handsome, or whatever, or cool, or anything. It depends on your phase in life, but they're all the same thing. So sometimes you think that teenagers are ridiculous because they act a certain, like they do the hair in a certain way, or they dress in a certain way. we're just as ridiculous as they are, because they're competing for people's attention. You're doing the same thing, but you do it in a different way. You do it by trying to look, pious, or you're doing it by trying to look, on top of your act, driving into the parking lot of the masjid with your Mercedes, and then acting a certain way or walking a certain way. You're on top of your act, you're on top of your world. You're doing the same thing that teenagers are doing, but you're doing it in a different way. But basically, at the core of it, it is just the same thing. You want people's attention. You want people to think of you as different, distinguished, superior, better. So it's quite childish, isn't it? But we don't recognize that it is childish. Why? Because the rest of adults around us are doing it. And they may be all childish. But you label certain acts childish because they are done by teenagers. And you think that, how foolish is this and stuff. And you're just as foolish. Because you're actually paying attention to all of those people who have no power. And the difference between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the creation is not just that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all capable, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also al-wadud, all compassionate. And the people who are capable may not be compassionate. And people who are compassionate may not be capable. And even if they are capable, the capability is limited. And if they are compassionate, their compassion also has limits and bounds. So after all, we just want to go back and ask ourselves, how am I doing this? Or why am I doing this? Or isn't this like foolish of me or childish of me to want anything, to want any recognition, any praise, any reward, any gains other than His pleasure subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this diverting glorification, you glorify Allah, Allah is exalted and glorified much in your heart, that diverts you from thinking of anything else, paying attention to anything else, wanting, seeking, pursuing any other gains. But all you need is closeness to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then he says, so with glorifying others, I'm concerned with glorifying others or paying attention to them. A servant should always maintain this state of glorification, especially when his heart is in the presence or remembrance of Allah. Being with Allah inevitably leads to nearness and love. And if these are not associated with glorification, they may lead one outside of the limits of servitude. Because we said that servitude is a mixture between the submission and love. And if you lose one of the two limbs of servitude, then you are outside of the bounds of servitude. So if it is submission without love, you're outside the bounds of servitude. If it is love without submission, you're outside of the bounds of servitude. So there is a statement from one of the righteous women, and we don't know if this truly reported, if she truly said it or not. But if she said it, she is a righteous woman. The statement is wrong, and she is a righteous woman. And that is what we need to train ourselves to be able to recognize, that the statement could be wrong, and the speaker could be like a righteous person, like a very good righteous person. So this statement is reported from Rabbi al-Adawiyya, who was a very righteous person from the 2nd century after Hijrah. And in that statement, or it was reported that she said that, "Oh God, I don't worship you out of fear from you or out of hope in your reward, but out of love." And the way of the righteous predecessors and the greatest of all, which are the Sahaba, and the way of the prophets, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described them as supplicating to Him, رَغَبًا وَرَهَبًا, with hope and fear. With hope and fear. So if the prophets supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala رَغَبًا وَرَهَبًا, with hope and fear, then certainly those are our role models. So we worship Allah with all of this combined, but the dominant feeling is love. The dominant feeling is love. But we don't forget the glorification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, otherwise you transgress. Because Allah is unlike, your mother, your wife, where the feeling could be purely love without fear, without, due glorification. You don't necessarily glorify your wife. You could love your wife, but you don't, or your husband, but you don't glorify them. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is necessary to keep the feeling of glorification, at-ta'zim, لجلاله عز وجل. So you keep this feeling inside you, because the love and intimacy could result in some ru'una, or some imprudence in dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is love mixed with glorification. Then you continue the walk consistently, dawam as-sayr, which is consistent walking or consistent journeying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, بين تعظيم المذهل, تعظيم المذهل, which is the diverting glorification, ومداناة حاملة. As for his saying, the moving nearness, حاملة means carrying. It carries you. Closeness, مداناة means closeness. حاملة means it carries you, it enables you, it empowers you, it helps you. So that is مداناة حاملة, nearness. As for his saying, the moving nearness, he means the proximity and closeness to Allah that incites the servant to have these components. This closeness makes him glorify Allah in a manner that will divert him from paying attention to his self or others. The closer the servant becomes to the truth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more he glorifies him, and the less mindful he will be of the creation. Mudanat hamila is, think of it like this. At the end of the race, racers usually sprint at the end of the race. Why? Because they see the post at the end of the race, the goal, the final goal, the finish line. So basically, the closer you get to that finish line, the more energy you will have. The closer you get to, and that is where you can sprint. Keep in mind that they actually have more energy. It is not just that they're doing it intentionally. Before this, they may not have that much energy. There is the so-called adrenaline rush, which they get when they get closer to the finish line. And that last push of adrenaline gets them sprinting or accelerating their speed before the finish line. So you can imagine that this finish line is to have this, ma'iyyatullah azza wa jalla, is to be in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and certainly that's the most beautiful, most exalted objective. And then you feel that you're getting closer and closer, and that feeling itself, that you're getting closer, that you were successful at coming all the way here, and you're so close, and it is so encouraging, it is so moving, it is so supportive, that you will get this rush. It's a spiritual rush, that I am that close. So let me end it in the best way, in the greatest way, in the most beautiful way, and so on. So that is the feeling that the person gets when he gets closer. And the closer you get, the more closer you want to be. So you recognize that you have been successful so far, and then you get encouraged. But there is another thing also. There is another thing. Because closeness to Allah means more recognition. Means more recognition. You see, recognition and love are, for any being other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recognition may not always lead to more love. More recognition does not always lead to more love. Because more recognition, we as human beings, full of faults and mistakes and weaknesses. You get to know someone better. You get anyone. You get to know, like, your parents, your sheikh, your friend, anyone. You get to know them better. You get to know more about their weaknesses. So, not necessarily, but with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're completely parallel. More recognition, more love. More recognition, more love. So when you get closer and closer, that means more recognition. You're closer to Him. So it means more recognition, it means more love. And that love pulls you further towards Him. It pulls you closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is al-mudara al-hamila. And then he said, so you continue your walk, your journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the midst of this diverting glorification and moving nearness or proximity, closeness. وَسُرُورٍ بَعْث. And then he said, as for the reviving joy, it is the happiness and glorification as well as the delight of one who finds in this nearness, or the delight one would find in this nearness, or one finds in this nearness. This nearness, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you that happiness, inner peace, delight, sweetness, that once you taste it, you can't turn your back to it. Once people, taste it, truly taste it, they cannot turn their back to it. That's why Abu Sufyan said but not everyone tasted it. Not everyone who claims to be Muslim tasted it. Not everyone who has a beard tasted it. Not everyone who goes to the masjid tasted it. So, so Abu Sufyan said to Herakl, when Herakl asked Abu Sufyan, does anyone go back into this belief? He was asking him about the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So Herakl was asking Abu Sufyan about the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. And he said to him, هل يرتد أحد منهم سقطة لدينه? Does anyone of them go back into this belief out of resentment of their deen or out of resentment of this new deen? And Abu Sufyan said to him, no. Abu Sufyan said to him, no, they don't. So Herakl was an educated man. So what did he say to him? He said, وَكَذَلِكَ الْإِيمَانِ إِذَا خَالَطَتْ حَلَاوَتُهُ بَشَاشَةَ الْقُلُوبِ. Likewise, when the sweetness of Iman mixes with the hearts, that is what happens when the sweetness of Iman mixes with the hearts. He said, that is what happens when the sweetness of Iman, even Herakl knew this, or the Roman Caesar. So that is what happens when the sweetness of Iman mixes with the hearts. You can't go back. You can't turn your back. You can't walk away. So he says here, there is nothing of the pleasures of this world that is comparable in any way to the joy and happiness of the heart and the delight of the eye, contentment, which means contentment, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His closeness. This is one of the states of the people of paradise. A knowledgeable person said, there are times when I would say, if the people of paradise can be in a state like this, they are indeed living in a good life. He says this joy, no doubt, urges him to be constant in walking to Allah and doing his best to seek Allah's pleasure. If one didn't achieve this joy, or even a portion of it, then one should doubt their faith and deeds. For Iman has sweetness, for sure. It has sweetness. If one has not tasted it, then one should go back and obtain a light by which he may discover the sweetness of Iman. So, you go back and look for the light, because you have been walking on a path that may not be the right path. So go back and look for the light to discover the right path, because the right path will lead to the sweetness of faith. will lead to inner happiness, will lead to peace of mind. Yes?
Is light necessarily knowledge, or it could be other than that?
Light is the beneficial knowledge. And the beneficial knowledge may not necessarily be, your knowledge of fiqh, even though all of this is helpful. And the recognition of Allah's rulings is part of the recognition of what Allah wants and what Allah doesn't want, and what Allah likes and what Allah doesn't like. So it's part of his recognition. But it is the knowledge that will touch the heart. And sometimes very little of this knowledge can touch your heart in great ways. And sometimes much of that knowledge may not touch your heart, may actually drive you away, because it will cause you pride, it will cause you to show off with it. It may distract you from the purpose of, the right purpose of this knowledge is to get you closer. But sometimes you ride a horse that can take you to the different destination if you have no control over your horse. So you need to have good control over your horse to keep it on track. And that knowledge could be a horse, a very good horse, that could lead you to the right, or carry you to the right destination, but sometimes you lose control over it, and then it leads you to the wrong place. So it is not about the amount as much as it is about the effect. But if the amount is great and the effect is great, that is the greatest scenario, for sure. The more knowledge and greater effect, that is the best scenario. But what matters the most is how much you will benefit of it. That is why the Prophet ﷺ used to seek refuge in Allah from علم لا ينفع وأعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع. The Prophet used to say, اللهم إني أعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع ومن قلب لا يخشع ومن some reports and عين لا تدمع ومن نفس لا تشبع ومن دعوة لا يستجاب لها. So I seek refuge in you from an eye that doesn't have tears, from a heart that doesn't have khushu' or humbleness, from knowledge that doesn't benefit, that is of no benefit, from a soul that does not reach satiety, or that's always greedy, and from a da'wah that will not be answered, because the da'wah that is not answered is an indication that you lost your honor with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lost your status with Allah. Had you had your status, your da'wah would have been accepted. But sometimes the answer to the da'wah could be a deferred. That does not mean that you lost your status. It is still answered, but it is deferred. So he says here that whoever does not find that sweetness must go back and look for a light, to look for it. And he said that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned tasting and finding the sweetness of faith, which is al-dhawq wal-wajd. Dhawq is tasting and al-wajd is finding. So the hadith of Al-Abbas, radiallahu anhu, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, certainly he had tasted faith, he who is content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as his Lord, Islam as his religion, and Muhammad as his messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Tasted faith. So the hadith here says that it has a taste, and the hadith of Anas, the following hadith, that of Anas, tells us that that taste is sweet. So the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Anas, 3 things, whoever attains them will find the sweetness of faith: to have Allah and His Messenger dearer to him than anything else, to love a person only for the sake of Allah, or to love his fellow human being for Allah's sake, and to hate to return to kufr after Allah rescued him from it, as much as he hates to be thrown into the fire. And part of this also, because we really need to be cognizant of this, because we live in trying times and difficult times. Part of hating to go back into kufr, as much as you hate to be thrown into the hellfire, is to have the same fear for your children as well. Like to hate for your children to lose their way, or to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you certainly should love your children, and you do not want your child to be thrown into the hellfire. And a person who has this certainty in his faith would feel this much, would have this much concern for their children, even though they may or may not be able to guide them, but they will certainly do their best to help them. And then Imam al-Qayyim said, and I heard Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, may Allah sanctify his soul, say, if you don't find sweetness and joy in the deed you perform, then doubt its sincerity. Then reconsider whether it was sincere or not. Like if you do something good and it doesn't give you any joy or happiness or comfort, you should doubt whether it was sincere or not. For Allah is shakur, most appreciative and rewarding. So he says that he meant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would certainly reward his servant for his deeds in this world, as long as the servant is delighted and happy with his deeds. But if he does not find the delight and the joy in his heart, then his deed is impure. And that is, there is a difference between the challenges that you encounter, and the joy that you will find deep inside your heart, because you could encounter a lot of challenges that could make your life a little bit difficult, and you could find that difficulty, like you could be more focused on the difficulty than the sweetness that comes with this in your heart. The difference between pious people also get sad and depressed, right? However, deep inside, there is like an outer crust of sadness and depression. But deep inside, there is a reservoir of strength, certainty, tranquility, joy, that they need to tap into it. Sometimes the crust could be thick, and you may find it difficult to tap into that reservoir that you have inside, because there is like so much happening. But they should know that ultimately, if they are pious and they are, devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ultimately there is this reservoir that you need to tap into it. Regardless of the thickness of the crust, just know that for sure, just dig a little bit deeper and you will get there. But sometimes we give up. So don't think that the reservoir does not exist, because you have been overwhelmed by challenges, difficulties in your life that would make you sometimes feel that I truly have such a difficult life. And that could make you sometimes depressed and saddened. The Prophet ﷺ used to get depressed at times, but certainly that for him was quite different from the cause behind this for him was quite different from ours. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ أَلَّا يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ إِنَّ نَشَأْ نُنَزِّلْ عَلَيْهِم مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ آيَةً فَظَلَّتْ أَعْنَاقُهُمْ لَهَا خَاضِعِينَ. You're about to destroy yourself out of grief that they are not accepting faith. So that is what Allah said to the Prophet ﷺ. So Allah is telling the Prophet, you shouldn't. Why are you doing this? You should not. You're doing your best, and that is all that you're required to do. So don't destroy yourself out of grief for them. Allah will guide them if He wants. إن نشأ ننزل عليهم من السماء آية فظلت أعناقهم لها خاضعين. If we want, we would bring down a sign from the heavens that would make their necks in submission, that will make them in full submission, meaning that would make them in full submission. So, but that, certainly we may get depressed for multitudes of other reasons, sometimes extremely silly reasons. Like one of the Mashaykh told me that a man came to him and said that I'm really depressed and sad and so on. I think I'm going to lose my career. It was like a physician who was going through some hardship. And he said to the Shaykh that, like this, the major part behind the sadness and depression is that he encountered some financial difficulties, and yet he has savings that would suffice his family, himself and his family, for 3 years. So he said to him, the Shaykh said to him, do you mean 3 years here in America or back home? Because there's... No, he said, no, here in America. So Shaykh says so to live the way you're living now, you have savings that will enable you to live the same way you're living now for 3 years? And he said, yes. And the Shaykh said, subhanAllah. The Shaykh said that this is, aren't you concerned about this? Aren't you concerned about your concern? Your concern should make you concerned. If you have concern, despite the fact that you have savings that are sufficient for 3 years, and you are still concerned whether Allah will provide for you after the 3 years or not. I mean, if it is so pressing that you don't have food for tomorrow, maybe you would say you don't have the certainty of the Sahaba. If the Sahaba did not have for food for tomorrow, they would sleep, assured and not anxious. And Allah will provide for us. لو توكلتم على الله حق توكله لرزقكم كما يرزق الطير تغدو خماصا وتروح بطانا. If you rely on Allah as you should, He will provide for you as He provides for the birds. They go out in the morning empty stomach, or with empty stomachs, and they return back home in the evening with full stomachs. But you may say it's like, we don't have that much certainty, but if you have savings that will last you for 3 years in your family, so this should make us concerned. But the Prophet's concerns were different concerns. Yet, he would give it, like very distressed. So getting distressed, and I'm saying all of this because I know that many of you get distressed. You and I, we all get distressed often. Don't think that since I get distressed, I don't have the sweetness of faith. Because like I said, this may be the outer crust, and all you need to do is to dig a little deeper for the reservoir, that's deeper down there, of the joy, strength, certainty, comfort, contentment, and so on. But if you can't find any of that, then you need to look for the light. So that is the first level of the the 3 degrees of muraqabah, watchfulness of Allah. So the first degree of muraqabah is to consistently walk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with complete focus on your objective, which is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, amidst feelings of diverting glorification, moving nearness, and reviving joy. The second degree, which is a higher degree of muraqabah, is to observe Allah's observation of you and that is by rejecting interferences, by shunning and any rejection and disrupting the imprudence of forming barriers. This is an observation of Allah's watchfulness over you. So it's observation of a particular attribute, and it warrants safeguarding the interior and exterior. Okay, well let's try to make a little bit more, make this a little easier. So the مراقبة نظر الحق إليك, to watch Allah's watching you. برفض المعارضة. المعارضة is opposition. To basically shun every form of opposition. بالإعراض عن الاعتراض, by denouncing any form of rejection. ونقض رعونة في التعرض, and being clear of the imprudence of interferences. And let's not read anymore, let's just explain, because it is a little, you know. Basically, he said that you should, al-mu'arada, which is opposition, to be in opposition with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do you stay away from that, from any form of opposition? By al-i'rad an al-i'tirad. You quit objecting, you quit rejecting. And how do you reject? And how do you object? And so ultimately you are in opposition with Allah. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this book to us. And Allah said, وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا. The word of your Lord, the speech of your Lord, has been fulfilled in complete truth and justice. In complete truth and justice. Why is that? Why does Allah say, or did Allah say in complete truth and justice? Because the speech of anyone is of two kinds, imperative and declarative, right? Imperative, declarative. Imperative is commands and prohibitions. When you're getting, commanded or prohibited from something, that is imperative speech. That's amrullah, Allah's orders, Allah's commands and speech. That's imperative speech. The declarative, اللي هو الخبر, يعني كلام الله بين الأمر والخبر. Allah's speeches are they imperative or declarative? Amr al-khabar, amr or statement, command or statement. The imperative speech would require what? Submission. The declarative speech would require what? Belief. Belief with certainty. Belief with certainty. What are the enemies of these two? Shubha and shahwa. So the enemy, your enemy, when it comes to the imperative speech, amrullah, is shahwa, your vain desires, your lust, your greed, whatever vain desires you have. Those interfere. Those cause you to reject. Those cause you to fail in your submission. Full submission to Amrullah Azza wa Jal, meaning that you will believe all that He said with complete certainty. All that Allah said, all that Allah told you in the Quran or in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, through the Prophet ﷺ, you believe it with certainty. Now you have accepted the khabar of Allah, Allah's statements. You believe it with certainty. Now you have accepted Allah's statement. The enemy of this is what? Shubha, the misconception. The amr of Allah, the imperative speech of Allah, the command and the prohibition, You need to receive it with submission, to abide by it, to perform it, to abstain from the prohibition. And your enemy here is a shahwa. So how do you avoid all forms of rejection that will cause you to be in opposition to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? By purging these two out of your heart. Every shubha and every shahwa. Whenever you have a shubha, the shubha will cause you to receive Allah's statement khabar with uncertainty. Or rejection, which would be detrimental to your belief, will be disbelief. And the shahwa is there to cause you to receive Allah's commands, Allah's amr, not khabar, amr, the imperative speech of Allah, without full submission, without complete submission. Now, think about it. Which one is worse? Which one is shubha? Because shahwa, unless a shahwa causes shubha, could it? Oh, absolutely, it could. Shahwa can cause shubha. Because the shahwa is your vanity, your desires, your lust, your greed. Sometimes people worship their desires. Have you not seen the one who took for God his own desires? And some people do this. So some people have moral weakness. And then you tell them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants this of you, or wants that of you, or commands you to do this, or prohibits you from that. And because of their moral weakness and their inability to resist the shahwa in their hearts, they reject the command. The asi will say, inshallah, I'll try, as long as he says, inshallah, I'll try, I am certain of Allah's command being good and being for my best interest and so on. But then he fails, and he's, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most merciful with the asi. So you fall, he helps you to rise. So as long as you're not objecting, as long as you're not saying, no, but that doesn't make sense to me, and why should I, wear hijab, for instance, or why should I quit doing this or quit doing that, or this is how you make money, this is how you do it. As long as you're not objective, and you fall, and you show humbleness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, help me rise, and then He helps you up, and then you carry on, and then you fall once again, and because He's most merciful, He helps you come up and rise, and then carry on. Once the shahwa pushes you to have shubha because of your moral weakness, and then you start to philosophize why this is right, what I am doing is right, and what I am commanded to do is wrong, is outdated, doesn't suit our times, is not making sense to me. I will only, I only believe things when I, get convinced or when they make sense to me. You tell them, well, look, this is right there. It's explicit statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. It's a matter of agreement. It's this, that, and they don't get convinced. That is when the shahwa caused you a shubha. And that shubha, when you truly act upon the shubha, if the shubha is something that is, there in your mind, and you're trying to resist it, and you're trying to figure out, how to find someone to give me a good answer to this matter, or so on. That is you don't get punished for this. But once you start to act upon your shubha, speak of your shubha, adopt it, defend the shubha itself, then you have been completely destroyed. So shubha is ultimately worse than shahwa, but the shahwa could lead to shubha because people who have moral weakness, they're sometimes too proud to acknowledge their moral weakness. So they tend to philosophize it. No, I'm not morally weak, but this command is not making sense, or this prohibition is not making sense. So to remove all forms of objection that will result in your opposition of Allah, being in opposition with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they said that you have to remove from your heart كل شبهة تعارض خبرك وكل شهوة تعارض أمرك وكل حب يزاحم حبك. That you have to remove from your heart every shubha that interferes with his statements, and every shahwa that interferes with his commands, and every love that competes with his love, and every love that competes with his love. Go back to where we were. When we talked about Ubudiyyah, we said you have two limbs for Ubudiyyah. And those limbs are the complete love and adoration, and complete submission, humility, subjugation. So basically, when you purge out all of the shubuhat and the shahawat, you're still missing something here. The love. You purged out all of the shubuhat and shahawat, so you have belief, in his khabar. You believe his akhbar, his statements, and you submit to his commands. So you have the submission part of Ubudiyyah, but you're missing one part that is important, which is al-hubb. And that hubb, or that love, is not like any other love, because Allah does not accept partners. Any love that will compete with His love, any love that will compete with Allah's love, is dangerous and is like the shubha and the shahwa. It also needs to be purged out of your heart. It also needs to be taken care of immediately before it causes you ruin and destruction. And that love that competes with His love could be the love of anything. Yes?
Would you consider this to be the worst one out of three? The love for something that's competing with love of Allah?
The love that exceeds, the idea here is it depends also on the level. But certainly, once the love of anything exceeds His love, then you're ruined. Once the love of anything exceeds your love for Him. And since we're talking about this issue here, to completely, clarify this point, this matter, the love that competes with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could be the love of money, could be the love of status, power, prestige, the other gender, could be love of anything, could be love of the self, the ego, which will result in love of all of the other things. There are different degrees of love. And it is important that you know where you place everybody in the appropriate degree. Like you divide your heart into rooms. And there are rooms, there are floors in your heart that should be left empty. Should be left empty. Why? Because love is the various degrees. There is the so-called al-alaqa, which is connection, relationship, just like basic relationship. And this alaqa does not cause you any pain when it ends. Like, you know, someone came from, you work in some IT company, and someone came from California and worked for you for a week, and you had like good fellowship, relationship, etc. And then they left. Is there any problem? No, they left too. That's it. But you did have some good time together, you were friendly to each other, so you had a alaqa, and then that's it. And then there is the sababa. And the sababa, sometimes this gets translated as infatuation, but sababa basically comes from sabba, to pour, which means that your heart goes out after the person. You know, like there is, you know, your heart goes out for the person when they leave, when they depart, etc. And that is the sababa, and that is the level that is above al-alaqa. And then there is al-ishq wal-gharam. Those two degrees are they usually have some sexual connotation. And therefore, those two degrees should be, if you will fall into one of those degrees, you should be at the very beginning, not at the very end. And certainly this should be only for your wife. There is a level that is comparable to this that is not mentioned, which is the love of, you know, the mother and so on. This should be comparable to this, but a different form of love. It's a different form of love. But you have a degree here between the sababa. Sababa is when you've been working with this fellow for 4 or 5 years, and you're very good friends, and you're this or that, or your aunt is leaving, or something, you know, but there is like a stronger relationship, and then you feel some pain when they leave. And then the ishq and gharam and the comparable degrees that don't have sexual connotations, this is when you feel some devastation when the relationship ends or when they leave. When the relationship ends or when they leave, you feel some degree of devastation. And it depends on how devastated you want to be. So if you keep this at the lower levels, even for a spouse, you keep it at the lower levels so that you don't get devastated if something wrong happens. Completely devastated if something wrong happens. And then there is a layer above this which is called the tatayyum. And sometimes they translate this as total enthrallment. But let us explain it. Tatayyum is when you are enslaved to the beloved. Enslaved to the beloved. Like when you're the slave of your loved ones. And that does not belong to anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That should not, you know, no one should be allowed there into this level of love except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So but keep some margin of safety. So anyone that will get into the lower levels, the third or the fourth levels in your heart, keep them down. Not close to the fifth and highest level of tatayyum, or being enslaved to the beloved. And if you reach the point where you feel that you are enslaved to your spouse, whether it's wife or husband, then you're getting into shirk. You're getting into shirk. Basically, your wife tells you, I want this. Allah tells you, you shouldn't have that. And you say, well, go ahead and do it. Because my wife will get, upset or disappointed or something. If the same applies to the husband. Because لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. There is no ta'ah, there is no obedience for any creation at the expense of disobeying the Creator, whether this creation is husband, father, mother, anyone. So it is extremely important that we be moderate in our love, so that we don't get devastated, and so that there is no love that is competing with Allah's love in our hearts. Because if you could very easily allow the love of people to compete with Allah's love in your heart. And that is when you are putting your iman, your faith in danger. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ said, أحبب من أحببت هونا ما عسى أن يكون بغيضك يوما ما وأبغض من أبغضت هونا ما عسى أن يكون حبيبك يوما ما. So love those whom you love with moderation, they may be your foes one day. Hate those whom you hate with moderation, they may become your loved ones one day. So be moderate in your love and in your hate. This was reported from the Prophet and from Ali radiallahu anhu. Some people, even the one that is reported from the Prophet sallallahu in Tirmidhi is sound. So it's an acceptable chain of narration. And it was also reported from Ali, but traceable all the way up to the Prophet ﷺ, as we said. So love those whom you love with moderation, they may be your foes one day. Hate those whom you hate with moderation, they may become your loved ones one day. And moderation means to love them and to be dutiful to them, but to keep them far away from the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so there is no confusion of roles here whatsoever between khalq wal khaliq, the creation and the creator. Someone? Yeah. And maybe we'll take questions on, when is the break now? After 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay, so we'll just take questions and then break.
If you're performing the second degree properly, then you don't have to. It's like driving the car. If you're behind the steering wheel and you're driving, you don't have to worry about turning all the other wheels. They turn by themselves. So if you're focusing on observing Allah, observing you, and you're focusing on putting your love where it belongs, would all these other things just happen kind of automatically? You wouldn't have to fight things off if you're taking care of the second degree properly, because it sounds like you've got a whole task sheet of things you got to do, but I'm just wondering, if you do this one, does that trip all the other switches the right way?
Yes, they are very interdependent. It is impossible to be successful at any of these unless you are successful at all of them. But they are interdependent, and no one who is in love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will neglect to clear his heart out of, shubha and shahwa, misconceptions and vain desires or vanities. So anyone who is in true love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will clear his heart out of the shubha and shahwa. So he will be doing it.
Will this happen naturally, or is it something you have to do intentional, conscious, or does it just happen the same way you would do cleanse your body, so to speak, without getting technical about it? If you want to cleanse yourself,
okay,
you do certain things to cleanse your internal self. So if you do this, you don't have to worry about every single organ getting cleansed if you do the master cleanse, so to speak. It's part of the process, right? I don't know, I'm asking.
Now, the benefit of coming to like a function like this is to learn about the inner crevices of our hearts, and to learn about the tricks of the shaitan, and to learn about the stations of Ar-Rahman that we should, ascend in. And this learning and laying out things and clarifying them should help the seeker on the path, should help the traveler. And the more, if you travel on a path that has, many milestones and so on, it will be an easier travel. You will be less likely to get lost, and you will likely get to your destination faster and easier. So it is helpful to learn about these things. Now, do you need to memorize this stuff? No. This stuff registers in two places, your mind and your heart. And the mind may forget, but the heart, if it is sincere, does not forget. So whether the mind remembers or not, whether you will be able to relate this to someone or not, you can grow your gardens without being able to, convey the water to, next door. But you will grow your gardens inside your heart, because the heart is not as forgetful as the mind. The pure heart, that is a good recipient of guidance, does not quickly forget like the mind. So this is just like the land. It would be the best case scenario if they are both retentive, because the heart will retain for the benefit of the individual, and the mind will retain for the benefit of others. But if the mind does not retain this and does not keep track of all of this that we said, or much of it, the heart does not forget. So don't worry about the heart. It won't forget, inshallah. Yes?
So what I understood that it's permissible to have the 3 first stages in the heart of halaqa and salaba, and the al-ishq wal-gharam, in a moderate, with a moderate amount, right?
Yeah.
So I've heard a statement from many scholars that he would say, for instance, if someone say in Arabic, لا تصح لك عضلية إذا بقى لغيره فيك بقية, meaning that you should clean your heart explicitly, completely from any love other than Him. Like, do not leave an atom of love to anything else. And your heart should be completely 100% to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If there's anything that comes into it, that will be rejected. Like your worship or your certitude will be rejected. Is that true?
The Prophet loved Aisha, right?
Yes.
And Khadija, and the rest of his wives. And loved Fatima so much.
But they say this love is like kind of tenderness, not really love.
He said, he was asked, who is the person that you love the most? And he said, Aisha. And they said to him, we're not talking about this, we're talking about men. And he said, her father. So, but he was asked about love. So why should we? However, certainly, this would be extremely valid if this is حب يزاحم حب. As long as this حب does not interfere with, does not compete with His love, subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that's fine. Once it starts to compete, that's why I said leave a margin of safety, because you do not want to get so close to danger. Once the hubb of someone rises in your heart to alarming levels, that you start to consider, their pleasure above Allah's pleasure, or like Allah's pleasure in any way, or even close, then you're in danger. keep them down. Love in moderation, like the Prophet told you. So bring it down. Where do you draw the line between not being enslaved to the beloved and detachment, which is difficult to build companionship with? Practically speaking, what should a marital relationship look like when it is hard to love your spouse for the sake of Allah because the spouse is not committed to loving Allah? And that's a dilemma. So if anyone who's married to someone who loves Allah, he should appreciate this so much, and he should be so expressive of this appreciation, because if he could only know what it means to have this conflict inside your heart if he's married to someone who does not love Allah. So part of the appreciation of this is that you express it to your spouse. And express it by actions and statements, because the expression by action is even more important than expression by statements. But may Allah help out the people who fall into this dilemma. Anyway, there are two different types of love. There is love that is natural, and there is love that is shara'i. Natural is called jibilli, and the love that is shara'i is religious love. The love that you work on, that you try to promote, that you actively promote in your heart, and take care of, and sustain, and work on, nurturing it, is the love that you're required to have for Allah, His Messenger, and the believers. Now, the love that comes natural with, our humanity, you love those that are kind to you, you love those who love you, you love your spouse. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. It's one of His signs that He created for you from yourselves mates to indwell with in peace and tranquility, and He put between you compassion and mercy. And Allah allowed us to marry the people of the book, to marry from the people of the book, or to marry women of the people of the book. And that marital relationship is built on compassion, is built on compassion and mercy. The foundation of it is tranquility, and the wings will be compassion and mercy. Compassion in times of good times, mercy in bad times. When there is agreement, compassion, there is disagreement, mercy, but at all times, tranquility, serenity. Second, so that is the nature of marital relationships. And Allah allowed us to be married to people, to women of the people of the book. Then that is the natural love for the spouse that you would have. But this natural love will be conflicting inside your heart with the religious resentment and disavowal of her ways, of her disbelief in Allah, of her belying the Prophet ﷺ by not believing in him. And that is not easy. Therefore, we usually advise people to look for a religious woman. The advice of the Prophet ﷺ, marry the religious one. What does taribat yadak mean? Because, the Prophet ﷺ said, تنكح المرأة لأربع لمالها وجمالها وحسبها ودينها فاظفر بذات الدين تربت يدك. the woman, any woman would be married for one of 4 reasons: her wealth, her beauty, her status or lineage, and her deen. So marry the one with the deen. Usually the translation is that you may prosper. But I think that the more accurate translation, lest you will never prosper. Otherwise, you will never prosper. Because taribat yadak comes from what? Turab, dust, soil. And what does it mean to say taribat yadak? It means that your hands will be stuck to the turab. So, taribat yadak, if you don't marry the religious one, your hands will be stuck to the turab, the ground, soil, dust, which means what? He will never prosper. So that is the more accurate one. It is not marry the religious one that you may prosper, marry the religious one, otherwise you will not prosper, which is certainly stronger. So, but we would say that certainly, like if she is religious, religious should be like the denominator here. You add to this anything else, that's good. You add to the other ones, they're not necessarily rejected or anything for the other reasons, the wealth, the beauty, the status, but contingent upon the presence of religion. Some of the scholars said that those are all zeros. Unless there is religion, then there will be zeros to the left of the one, or to the right of the one. So the religion is one, they're all zeros. But if you have that religion, you put the ones 0 and 0 and 0. Anyway. So how can we contextualize Allah's love into an emotion/feeling in our heart rather than just a thought/statement, or by just or just through obedience? Okay, so how could it be an emotion in your heart? Well, so certainly this may be good for a seminar, but certainly this requires contemplation, requires thoughtfulness. Think of the beauty of Allah. Because why do you love people? Why do you love anyone? Why do you love anyone? Why would you love anyone?
Because you're married?
Why would you love anyone? What are the causes of love for anyone?
Careness, kindness.
There are 2 causes.
What you do for you?
What they do for you and for their own merit. So, don't you love Umar radiallahu anhu? Although Umar did so much for you, but it is indirect, so you don't feel it, it's not tangible. But you love Umar for the magnanimity of his character, for the greatness, the justice, the mercy, all of this combined in the character of one human being. So you love Umar radiallahu anhu even though you have never had direct interaction with Umar radiallahu anhu. So that is loving for one's character, merit, and so on. And the other reason for love is for the relationship with you, for their kindness towards you. You love your neighbor who's kind towards you, like takes care of your kids when you're at home and looks after your property and, you know, and stuff like that. Kindness begets love. Kindness begets love. So it's either for merit or for kindness towards you. Well, think about it. You know, if these are the two causes for love, think about it as these two reasons for love relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For merit, you know, who should be loved more for merit than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And for kindness towards you, you know, you think about it like, who's kinder to you than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Who made you, who created you, who sustained you, who maintained you? That thoughtfulness will bring about love. That love will be nurtured through connectedness, which is salah, connection. So if you stand in prayer, you know, certainly any love needs nurture. And the nurture of this love is through connectedness. And the connectedness is by nearness, proximity, munajah. Salah is munajah. Salah is like a soft conversation between one and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now when you stand in prayer and you remind yourself of the hadith in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I divided the salah between myself and my servant into two halves concerning al-Fatiha. فإذا قال العبد الحمد لله رب العالمين قال الرب حمدني عبدي وإذا قال العبد الرحمن الرحيم قال الرب أثنى علي عبدي وإذا قال العبد مالك يوم الدين قال الرب مجدني عبدي وإذا قال العبد إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين قال الرب هذه بيني وبين عبدي ولعبدي ما سأل فإذا قال العبد اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت قال الرب هذه لعبدي ولعبدي ما سأل. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I divide the salah, which is the Fatiha, because it's the cornerstone of the salah, between myself and my servant into two halves. When my servant says, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, the Lord says, my servant thanked me. And when my servant thanks, it says, Rahman ar-Rahim, the Lord says, my servant praised me. Athna alayya. And when the Abd says, Malik Yawmiddin, the Lord says, my servant glorified me. And when the servant says, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, the Lord says, this is between me and my servant. This is basically the definition of the relationship between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only you do we worship, and only you do we seek help from. From us, worship. From you, help, support, sustenance, everything. And then Allah said, this is between me and my servant, and for my servant is whatever he asks for. Granted. Granted to my servant whatever he asks for. So when the servant says, ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, Allah will say, this is my servant's request, and it is granted. Basically, there is a huge difference between standing in prayer and reciting this thoughtlessly, and standing in prayer and thinking that you're actually conversing with Allah. Thinking of the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ar-Rahman yansib wajhahu ila wajhi kama lam taltafit. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at you as long as you don't turn around, turn away. You know, this is not only with your vision, it's also with your heart. You're not turning away from Allah by distraction, you know, whichever form of distraction. So this love that is warranted by all means through merit and through kindness will be nurtured by connectedness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that connectedness with Allah, you need to do the work. You need to do the work. And once you have done this, you will find that this becomes, you know, an emotion, irresistible emotion. You know, that it's not stoppable. The love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will become certainty, an emotion, not just a thought, and not just, an act of obedience. Very bad. Okay.